So welcome everybody to this podcast in our series, Leading in a Climate Changed World. It's a huge pleasure and privilege today to be talking with Joanna Macy. Joanna is what might be termed a sacred activist. Her work addresses psychological and spiritual issues, Buddhist thought, systemic change, and contemporary science. And over many decades, she has created a theoretical framework for personal change, for social change, and a workshop methodology for its application. Joanna graduated from Wellesley College in 1950 and received her PhD in religious studies in 1978 from Syracuse University. She's an international spokesperson for anti-nuclear issues, peace, justice, environmentalism, and is perhaps most renowned for her book, Coming Back to Life, the latest version of which is subtitled The Updated Guide to the Work That Reconnects. Other books she's well known for are Our World and The Great Turning Initiative, which deals with the transformation from an industrial growth society to what she considers to be a more sustainable civilization. In addition, Joanna has 3 books being published next year in 2020. A Wild Love for the World, Joanna Macy and the Work of Our Time. Another book called Active Hope, How to Face the Mess We're In Without Going Crazy, which is co-written with Chris Johnston. Updated edition is coming out late next year. And Rilke's Letters to a Young Poet, co-written with Anita Barrows, is also going to be released late next year. So you seem to be becoming more and more prolific as you journey through the decades, Joanna.
Yes. Well, I can't run around as much as I used to, so why not?
Right. So thank you so much for giving us your time. I know you don't do so many of these kind of interviews these days, but thank you so much for your time today. And maybe we could start by just looking at how we work with the very complex set of feelings that we have inside us when we contemplate the climate emergency. Part is hopeful, maybe part is angry, part is afraid, part is in denial, part is furious. There's a lot of kind of emotional intensity as the climate emergency heats up. How do you suggest, and how do you also work with it for yourself? How do you suggest we manage these feelings?
We use them. We welcome them. The work that I have done over the last 4 decades, the work that reconnects, just starts with the challenge of being with and learning how to recognize and use our feelings. The hyper-individualism of the last 5 centuries has bred in us a kind of, oh, here's a new word I learned just this week, alexithymia, difficulty in identifying and meeting our feelings. And so to recognize the big challenge for us now, I believe, is fear. And so one of the things we want to quickly learn is how not to be afraid of fear. And we can do that in a group or do that by ourselves, but just identify that, because fear takes us away from ourselves, our true nature, and each other, where our promise is. Our promise is in our recognition of our belonging. I picture the relationship to fear as sometimes as 2 ditches, one on either side of the road we are walking toward the future. We want to hang on to each other so as not to fall into a ditch. On one ditch is what fear, when we're, it's just closing down, apathy, denial, pretend I'm not here, don't talk to me about it. We all know that, because it's like we have to recognize that's in ourselves too. Yeah. Go away, don't tell me about it, and just stick your fingers in your ears. On the other side of the road is the ditch, is the other face of that denial of feelings and fear, which is panic, or social hysteria. And that is no longer just a theoretical construct. We see it booming and bursting all over the world. And certainly in my own country, I'm American and live in the United States. And to see how fear, but it began back, it's been used by the leaders. It certainly began at the, with 2001 with choosing another enemy in order to make people obedient and to make the Islam an enemy and invade Iraq. So fear is something that we need to be on very good conversational, wiseacre kind of conversation, and not be afraid of our own fear, and helping people normalize their fear. Of course you're scared. Good grief, why would you not be? We have enough nuclear weapons to blow up us 1,000 times, and they're in the hands of people whom we don't trust. Of course you're scared. The forests are disappearing. Our older kin, the species, we're just the youngest. They're all leaving us alone on this planet we've destroyed as they die off in the gazillions. Of course we are. So you go below the fear to recognize that we're scared because we actually love this life and don't want it taken from us. And we turn to accept ourselves as belonging to this earth and deserving to be here. Yeah.
Right. So you said we can use our feelings, we're going to work with our feelings. And it sounds like you're saying the first part of that is to acknowledge that we have them and that it's natural to have them. And then I wonder how there's also, increasing amount maybe of anger and people saying we really have to stop, people in the streets. I also wonder how do we work with our anger and the rage that we sometimes feel about this topic?
Well, we certainly don't want to be afraid of it. And that it's an expression of fear. And it's allows us, if we're unafraid of the anger, to just take its hand, move around, and step into the what we imagine the mindset of the person who's holding that, and that we can use the anger actually as a gateway, odd as it may sound, to compassion. I recall, because I draw a great deal of inspiration and steadiness, such as that I have from the Buddhist tradition, and in the community of Tibet in exile, one of the key archetypal figures there is one of extreme anger. This is a wrathful form of Manjushri, the celestial bodhisattva of wisdom. But this wrathful form, oh my, he's on flames, his eyes are rolling, he has 3 heads, he has fangs and roars, and I remember so well standing there as I was learning its practice with one of the head monks in that monastery. And as he pointed out, the necklace of skulls and the poisonous snakes around, everything that you could possibly imagine as fuming anger. And he said, "Oh, such great anger, straight from the heart of pure compassion." What? And then you realize when you're not scared of the anger, including your own, that it has to do with justice. In the truth mandala that we do, in the work that we connect, we always look at the positive side of what we are inviting people to express. And when you go into that truth mandala and take the stick of anger, we are reminded that the root source of that is passion for justice. Somebody's cheating you of what is deservedly yours, or that what is yours to express. What is yours, it could be what is yours to eat because you're hungry. What is yours to know because you've been deprived of truth.
Beautiful. And I wonder, it takes me to another question actually about how do we balance what sometimes seems like the paradox of accepting that things are as they are, like when you talk about your Buddhist lineage and your Buddhist practice, a lot of that is about meeting the world as it is. And at the same time, things have to change. So how do we work with the paradox of acceptance and change in the same breath?
Well, you have just touched on my sorest, tenderest point with my adopted faith tradition. I just to be tranquil and sit there on your zafu, aiming for serenity when the world is burning, has always been. And I take great inspiration with another teacher of mine, Thich Nhat Hanh, who was constantly, he gave voice to this very much, because these are actually, but so I haven't yet met a teacher who's able to satisfactorily explain that truth inside each of us that we are asked to accept, and we are, and we don't want to abandon our indignation and passion for justice. I certainly don't. But that allows me to bring up what I've learned about that with the deep adaptation work of Jem Bendell. I'm sure you're familiar with that.
Yes, he's also going to be interviewed in this series.
Good. Oh, well, I found that he, in his work, which has had great meaning for me, and I'd like to come back to it to show how some ways that I've been using his 4 R's. But he invites us to accept that we are, in all likelihood, not going to be able to save the industrial growth society or globalized corporate capitalism, that is destroying our world, and that it's on such a track that it's now. Another way of phrasing that came to me where I had a very pivotal experience after the IPCC report came out last fall. You remember, Robin, when I think it was early November, late October, and it told us that we have 11 or 12 at that point years left to cut our carbon emissions in half, or our greenhouse gas emissions in half. And I was at that point, I took that in, went on retreat and at Spirit Rock Meditation Center, and was engaged in a walking meditation. And I was trying to concentrate, just be in the moment, just with this step or that step. But there was a little irritation in my mind as I remembered something from my past, something very trivial, but embarrassing. Usually those moments, something you wished hadn't happened. I couldn't get away from it. I tried noting it, moving it. And then I thought, oh, I ought to be able to handle that. And then came this colossally thunderous voice coming right down my left side, and it said, just fall in love with what is. And at that moment, I saw two curtains closing, and I just saw them right there. One was the IPCC report, and the other was Bolsonaro's election in Brazil. His promise to cash in on the Amazonian rainforest. And he's doing it.
Mm-hmm.
And those two together, I knew with those, it's finished. We can't possibly meet the needs when we lose. We can't lower our emissions if we lose the rainforest, the Amazon. So that just fall in love with what is another call to accept. And that was about the time that I was paying attention, particularly paying attention to Jem Bendel's deep adaptation. And in that adaptation, I find that acceptance, rather, in that acceptance, I found a kind of centering. I was about to say rest for my mind, to stop fighting with what I didn't want to accept. But I have accepted that with these curtains closing of Bolsonaro in Brazil and the IPCC, we're not going to make it. And then that asks me, then what's happened for me personally is that it has charged me, made me more present, riveted me on what is happening to our world. Oh, what a precious time this is. Oh, let us see what we can do. But we're not going to save globalized corporate capitalism. We're not going to be able to save, or to use the language of Russia or China, state corporations. We're not going to. We're going to have to, and we probably, and you may know that for decades, I have been organizing around and holding out the organizing principle of the Great Turning, mm-hmm. that we could organize our lives and our hopes to journey toward, motivate ourselves to create a life-sustaining society, which is not corporate capitalist. Mm-hmm. But we could do that. Now I see that it's evident that we can't stop, that the collapse of our political economy is, let's get it over as soon as we can, so that with what's left, we can. And there's so much energy at the local level, so much imagination, so much courage that I see, that I'm certainly not ready to say, throw in the chips. I'm feeling more inspired and more kind of riveted attention than ever to see now we have a chance. But we can't do it. We couldn't do it with the corporations in control. Mm-hmm. Because the corporations have kind of gone on automatic for some time now, for some decades, that they are automatically privileging profit. And if you don't agree with that, you're out. And they're also, in addition to that, they have taken over the governments. And so, since that's the case, we're not going to be able to do it the way we thought. And let's get it over with. Let's move on. I'm talking, maybe I will regret talking as frankly as this.
No, I find it very powerful, actually, and also quite confronting in a way. I've also read Jem Bendel's work, and as I say, we're going to be talking with him also in this series. And it brings me just to understand, maybe in a sentence or two, what I think I hear you say then is that the systems that we know are in a state of collapse, but that doesn't necessarily mean the human species is destined for extinction.
No.
Right. So
No,
what?
that, and even Jem says that is possible. And so I certainly can say that. And there will be. This is scary. So where there's a lot of reasons for crying, a lot of shedding of tears.
Mm-hmm.
The shedding of tears is essential. We have to root ourselves in our deep love for life so that it's my friend Matthew Fox, whom I brought to Findhorn back in '91 in the Easter Mysteries. He has said that Eros is more important than ever, the erotic. We need to reconnect with our base chakra. We've cut ourselves off. We have used ourselves in service to engines of destruction and toxins, so that we wouldn't do if we were connected to our own sensuality and sexuality. Mm-hmm. So that I think that I go back, I bless you for the instinct in you to start this with feelings. Mm-hmm. Let us welcome our feelings and let us invite the feelings that have been canceled out by the feelings that come up with the recognition. Because what's interesting, now what's really interesting is that just at the time when we're about to do ourselves in, there is, through science, this recognition that the earth is alive. It's a living system. And you know that I've been a scholar of systems theory and have published on it, and that I follow that Gaia theory with great interest. And am and how it fits with deep ecology, and how with that we can allow ourselves and bend our every part of our from our crotch to our crown, as Bill Thompson used to say, to rally ourselves, use our sensuality, use everything, because we belong. We belong to this earth. The earth is alive. The earth is our larger body. And the earth has great wisdom. And we can open ourselves to a Gaia consciousness. And that's happening.
Right. So that brings me to a question around the type of leadership that we need at the moment. As you know, this podcast is really in a leadership series. So it sounds like one of the things you would say is we need leaders who are in touch with their feelings and are not afraid of feelings. I'm wondering what other characteristics you think leaders need at this time, and also where you're experiencing and witnessing the kind of leadership that inspires you at the moment.
I'm not in government. We finally have some really good, progressive young people in Congress, but we don't know how to support them. Let me just go quickly. What kind of leadership? It's a leadership that knows how to use the precious time we have right now. Because this time, particularly in my country, our capacity to meet, move around, and speak freely may be cut short. Because the fear of, or because it's a government dominated by fear of their own citizenry. And we know what happens there. So use this period of time, because when this political economy is about to go under, there's a backlash, or like a venomous, like a scorpion. So we have to treasure our freedom to talk now, our treasure to meet. And then in another, meet in groups. Don't try to handle this by yourself. And the work that I've developed, we have developed, has been with hundreds and thousands of people. The deep ecology work, we call it, and the deep work that we connect, same, has wonderfully fertile variety of ways that we can just very simply get together and touch each other's deepest connection with life and enliven it. We need each other for our brains to work. We need each other for our hearts to experience courage. We need each other to trust. So this is what we need for this passage. The passage will be hard. There'll be a lot of dying. It will test us. But we do it for life. I will only see a little bit of it. But I'm so glad to have seen what I do. And I see it here in the Bay Area. And I see it locally. I see it in Colombia. I see it in Chile. I see it in sub-Saharan Africa, where they take these simple practices, where people experience being totally honest with each other. And it doesn't take long. We have to fall in love with each other again and hold each other, because we're going to go through a hard time.
Mm-hmm. Right.
We're made for that, Robin.
Mm-hmm.
We have it. We're strong enough for that. That's what I think the leader needs to say. The climate leader needs to assure people. You are strong enough for this time. Just don't try to do it. Just look at what, Extinction Rebellion, I was just looking at wonderful shots of what it was doing in London last week with such imagination. But that's what it's the collectivity, the belonging that they have found. They have found belonging in each other and with the future. And that draws out such creativity.
I'm wondering where else you see it. You said you don't see it in our political leaders at the moment. You see it in some of the people in Congress in the States. You named a few countries. I wonder if you could give us like 1 or 2 examples of where you feel like that's the kind of leadership that we need right now, just to kind of illustrate maybe 1 or 2. I want to know if anything else comes to mind. You talked about Extinction Rebellion also.
Yes, well, I said that, reached to that because that's publicly known. Mm-hmm. But what I can point to are people who aren't famous and known, mm-hmm. but people who have been just now that I heard of a group, groups that have been reaching out and weaving together, called the Terran Conspiracy. But they are, they're taking the principles of the work that we connect and of Gaian theory and of deep ecology and of ecology per se to work together. How can we regenerate our world? Or there is in my an actual community. Well, I see it in co-housings and eco-villages, as I'm sure you do around the world, Robin. But here there's Canticle Farm based on the teachings of St. Francis, as well as the work that reconnects. And their vision, I led the other day a workshop over there for the Canticle farmers, and I tried out the 4 R's of Jem Bendel. And so that
maybe because you've referenced it a couple of times and we haven't yet not everybody would have read that paper. Can you just name the 4 R's for our listeners?
Oh, yeah. So we gathered, we were 20 of us, and we said, here are some, but I had already proceeded in the morning talking about collapse. Well, these young people weren't ready to talk about collapse. They didn't think there was going to be a collapse. But also, okay, but here are some 4 questions, 4 R's. What are the values and behaviors that we have that we want to really use now and hang on to, that are relevant for this time? That's number 1. That's resilience. The second R, relinquishment, is what values and behaviors are we ready to relinquish, let go of, that's not useful now. Third, what are the values and behaviors that we would like to take from our past or from other cultures that we think would really, that we hanker for, that would feel good and help us? And fourthly, what would we now, as we, in this time when so much is uncertain, what do we want to make peace with? Who are the peoples? Who are the family? What is the forces that we want to make peace with? So we listed these.
And the third and the 4th R, just to be precise.
Excuse me. And the third then is restoration.
Right.
What you want to bring in that you don't have from your past or from another culture. And the 4th is reconciliation.
Right. Thank you.
With what and with whom do you want to make peace?
Mm-hmm.
So then we listed these, we counted off around the group by 4. People found themselves falling into one group of their number of that and that particular question. And they had, 15 minutes to or more to brainstorm what they wanted to make peace with, what they wanted to let go of, what they wanted to take. And it was one of the most enjoyable experiences of my life. I fell into the number 3, but they were all young people, and they had so much things that so full of ideas. And it made me feel, honey, you are one lucky lady. These 4 questions are, I think that, I'm going to accept the fact that we are going to face the collapse of blah, blah, blah. And instead, these questions, when tossed out like that and dealt with together, instilled such a sense of appetite, or even you could even call it optimism.
Right.
No. Oh boy. This is what we deserve. This is what our heart minds want.
That was going to be my last question. I think we probably need to start moving to a close now, but I wanted to ask you about optimism and hope, because I know you have this book coming out, and I know you've worked with Chris Johnson on active hope. And I wonder if you could just maybe close this with a sense about what is active hope, and where do you stand on the kind of optimism? Is optimism helpful energy? Is it about denial if we're in an optimistic state? Like how do we work with these feelings, but particularly about the nature of hope?
It depends on how you define hope. If you for Chris and me, and for the folks over at Canticle Farm, when we were doing the 4 hours, it's on what we want. It's on what we love to see. It's what looks good. It's what feels good, what we want to move toward. Now, that says nothing about the chances that we might compute as to, is that going to come into being? You don't think about the chances. You just think about what you want, what feels good, what feels destined, and then you move toward it. So I like that definition because it allows me to have active hope when I'm feeling hopeless in terms of things, the chances of it would be dim. So you stick with and I think that's the nature of the erotic and the appetite for life. You go for what feels right. You go for what feels good. And you don't stop and take your pulse. Ooh, am I optimistic now? That's kind of a disease over here. It has been in America. America has a little thing about optimism that is counterproductive.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. I think maybe that's a good place to close. Unless there's anything else you want to say, this is going to go out to a lot of corporate leaders, and I don't know if there's a particular message you might have for corporations at this time, or anything else you want to say before we close our time together. It's been very touching and moving for me to.
Well, you may want to obliterate some of what I've said.
Not in the slightest.
No, I think that I remember one of the most productive, insightful times of my life was working with systems thinker Elise and Kenneth Boulding on imaging the future. They were Quakers and systems thinkers. And that in imaging a future of without weapons, that was called, we realized that corporations had an enormous role to play in a peaceful world, in a world without weapons, because the corporations controlled so much transportation and communication. And that if we just switched the ownership, so we were imagining, everybody with each birth, each newborn would receive a little bit of the portfolio in a corporation. But these could be the people who are incarcerated in corporations, who are serving a corporation while in its bureaucracy, while it puts profit first and political control. If there is the people on the inside have to be there in order to liberate that intelligence, to liberate that technology, and that bureaucracy could so serve our planet.
Thank you so much. It's been a very rich time to spend with you. I know you turned 90 recently, so happy birthday for that. And we wish you every success and all strength and power as you go forward into this next decade also. It's great to see you in such good form. And we look forward to 3 books coming out next year also of yours, which is fantastic. And just, again, huge appreciation for the depth of your wisdom, your experience, but also your passion and your zest for what is possible. It's been very remarkable to spend this time with you. Thank you so much.